In this quick course session, we will show you how to configure a sample config YAML file used for the Universal Connector application in BMC AMI DevOps for DB2. BMC has provided several AMI DevOps sample config YAML files to assist you setting up. You can use the Universal Connector sample config YAML files in the supported CI/CD tools as shown here in the Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions folders downloaded from the BMC EPD site. In this slide, we are using the sample config YAML file named config schema migration compare DDL. This file contains the steps to connect to the ZOSMF server for communication, to transfer a DDL file to a mainframe dataset, to compare the local DB2 catalog to the transmitted DDL file, to transfer the generated compare output artifacts to the container workspace in Linux, and to run the JCL to implement the changes from the compare. In Windows Explorer on your PC, copy the sample file, giving it a new name, demo_config_sm_compare_DDL.yaml. The version property key is at the top of the config YAML file. The version identifies the code level used for your application image. Always use the latest version compatible with your installed image level. You can find this in the config YAML files downloaded from the BMC EPD site. Each line represents a property as a key value pair. Each property is made up of a property key on the left side of the colon and property value on the right side of the colon. Do not change the alignment or spacing of the property key and value. Let's start by editing the property keys needed to run your sample config YAML file via a pipeline or workflow. The authentication step is always required as the first step in your pipeline or workflow process to securely connect to the mainframe host on which ZOSMF is running. Edit the hostname property key to specify the mainframe hostname or IP address used for the ZOSMF server for the LPAR on which ZOSMF is running. Then edit the port property key, which is also related to your ZOSMF server. The authentication type property key is set up by default to use user-based, which requires the user and password property keys. The user value uses a mainframe user ID or variable. The password property value requires a variable so that it remains securely masked as it is passed to the ZOSMF server. The symbolic properties file path property value is the directory and file name of your customized AMI DevOps properties file. This property key supports relative path, so a period is supplied as the value. This file can be any name, but requires the properties extension. Before you run the sample pipeline or workflow, the AMI DevOps properties file must be customized. The file upload application transfers files from a container workspace to a mainframe environment. In this sample, the file upload step, local to mainframe, uploads a DDL file from the container workspace to the specified DDL PDS. In this session, we will not change any of the property key values, but I will explain the applicable property keys. The source directory property key specifies the directory on the container workspace from which the DDL file transmits. This property key supports a relative path, so a period is supplied as the value. The source file name property key is the DDL file name to be uploaded to the mainframe. The destination PDS property key specifies the mainframe dataset to transfer the file to. The destination member property key is the DDL member name in the mainframe dataset. In this example, the variable job_ID is used. All application steps, except authentication, have a step name definition for which you can specify any name. This allows you to create multiple step definitions if required. Now, we will configure the application step, local cat to DDL. This step compares the local DB2 catalog with a DDL member and produces CDL or change definition language statements to make the schema definitions in the catalog look like the schema defined in the DDL file. First, edit the SSID property key with your DB2 subsystem ID for the catalog compare. Here, I have used a specific DB2 subsystem, but you can also use a variable that represents the DB2 subsystem. Edit the work ID owner property key with your chosen work ID owner name. The work ID name property key will keep the job ID variable. The work ID is a component of BMC AMI Change Manager used to run the compare. The compare to DDL PDS property key contains the plugin property variable for the dataset and the job ID variable for the member name. The file was transferred in the file upload step. This member is used to compare against the schema definition in the DB2 catalog. The PDS property keys for CDL, worklist, impact report, and execution JCL each contain the plugin property variable to save the artifacts and the job ID variable for the member name. The execution JCL PDS property key contains the JCL used to run the worklist for the compare changes. The requested changes to the schema definitions in the DB2 catalog are made when the execution JCL is submitted in another step. For information about the additional property keys available in this step, please see the Config Schema Migration All Steps YAML file for field help and the BMC AMI DevOps online documentation. I scroll down to the job card property key in the local cat to DDL compare step. I edit the job card property key to meet your company's internal rules for JCL. Here, you can see that my job card references the account number variable, which is defined in the AMI DevOps properties file. The additional input keywords property keys for compare, import, analysis, and JCL generation are optional and can be updated based on your needs. For more information about the component keywords, see the BMC AMI Change Manager online documentation. The remaining property keys are explained but not updated. The JCL property key is predefined for the compare step local catalog to DDL. Most of the JCL set statements are required by the JCL procs distributed with the product. If your site needs a special load library concatenation, or if you have all the required load libraries in your link list, you can modify the job lib defined for the JCL's execution. Otherwise, do not modify the JCL in this property key. The acceptable return code property key is set to 0004, which is the maximum return code allowed for a successful run. The max job wait time property key is set to 2, which is the maximum length of time, in minutes, that the application waits for the compare job completion. If you find your job run requires more time, increase this value. The maximum allowed is 60 minutes. The output transmission step downloads the members generated from the compare process to the container workspace. We will not change any of the property key values, but I will explain the applicable property keys. To run this step, you must specify at least one of the source PDS property key for transmission. In the sample config file, we have defined each source PDS property key with a variable configured in the plugin property file. The source member name property key is defined with the job ID variable based on how it was defined in the local cat to DDL step. The destination directory property key is set to use the container workspace directory. This property key supports a relative path, so a period is supplied as the value. The destination file name property key is defined with the job ID variable. This is an optional step. The JCL execution using PDS member step runs the JCL from the mainframe dataset member to implement the changes on the catalog generated from the compare step. We will not change any of the property key values, but I will explain the applicable property keys. The JCL PDS property key is defined with a variable configured in the plugin property file for the mainframe dataset location. The JCL member name property key is defined with the job ID variable for the JCL member. The acceptable return code property key is set to 0004, which is the maximum return code allowed as a successful run. The max job wait time property key is set to 2, which is the maximum length of time, in minutes, that the application waits for job completion. If you find your job run requires more time, increase this value. The maximum allowed time is 60 minutes. After your configuration updates are complete, save the file and upload it to your CI/CD tool repository. For more information about the upload process, see the quick courses for uploading sample files. Thank you for your time. For more information about any BMC mainframe product, check the video description for links to the documentation and other related videos.